You don't get a vote, Ethan said, barely looking up from his phone. It's already decided. For a second, I thought I had misunderstood him. Behind us, two movers carried my dining table through the open front door of the lake house I had spent nearly 8 years saving to buy. Sunlight poured across the hardwood floors. Beyond the windows, the water shimmered between the trees, the exact view I had imagined every time I worked late, canceled a trip, or transferred another piece of my paycheck into the house fund. I stared at my husband. Your parents and Kyle are moving in here. Tomorrow, he said. They've already packed. Permanently. Ethan sighed as though I were creating an inconvenience. Kyle just got divorced. Mom and Dad shouldn't be living alone anymore. We have the space. You discussed my house with everyone except me. Our house, he corrected. Then he smiled, confident that I would do what I had always done, swallow my anger, keep the peace, and make room for everyone else. Instead, I walked outside and made one phone call. And by the time Ethan's family arrived the next morning, trucks loaded with furniture behind them, the decision he claimed was already made no longer belonged to him. I had found the lake house 3 months earlier at the end of a narrow road lined with pine trees. It had 4 bedrooms, a stone fireplace, and a weathered dock stretching over clear blue water. It needed work, but as an interior designer, I had seen what it could become. Ethan had stood beside me on the dock during our first viewing and wrapped an arm around my waist. This is finally going to be our peaceful place, he had promised. I believed him. Now, on the afternoon before we were supposed to move in together, he was assigning that peaceful place to his family without my permission. Your parents have a home, I said, and Kyle can rent an apartment. Dad's tired of maintaining their property, and Kyle needs support. Then help them find somewhere appropriate. I already did, Ethan gestured around the entryway. Here. One of the movers slowed as he passed us, clearly hearing every word. I lowered my voice. I paid the deposit. I qualified for the mortgage. Every payment came from my savings. You cannot invite 3 people to live here permanently without asking me. Ethan finally put his phone away. We're married, Claire. Stop acting like I'm some stranger trying to steal from you. That isn't what I said. It's what you're implying. His expression hardened. My family has done plenty for us. His parents had hosted occasional holiday dinners. Kyle had once helped Ethan move a sofa. None of them had contributed $1 toward the house. Did you tell them I agreed? I asked. He hesitated for half a second. That was my answer. They think this was a joint decision. They know you can be territorial, he said. I told them you might need time to adjust. My hands went cold. He had not only excluded me, he had prepared them to dismiss any objection I made. You told your family. I was the problem before I even knew they were coming. I told them the truth. You get emotional when plans change. The movers carried the final box inside and closed the truck. Ethan glanced toward the lake, already relaxed again. Once everyone settles in, you'll see this is for the best. Mom can use the downstairs bedroom. Dad wants the room facing the water. Kyle will need your office until he gets back on his feet. My office? You can work from the dining table. I looked through the glass doors at the dock, then back at the man who believed my years of sacrifice had bought him the right to overrule me. Claire, he said, softening his tone now that he assumed the argument was finished. Family comes first. I nodded once. Then I stepped onto the front porch, closed the door behind me, and called the number my attorney had given me months earlier. She answered on the second ring. I need you to activate everything we discussed, I said. Ethan watched me through the window, smiling as he called his mother to confirm their arrival time. When I ended the call, I walked back inside. He lifted an eyebrow. Are you done being dramatic? Yes, I said. Tomorrow is going to be very different than you expect. That evening, Ethan moved through the lake house as if he were preparing a hotel for guests he had personally invited. Mom will take the downstairs bedroom, he said, opening the door beside the kitchen. Dad's knees have been bothering him, so this will be easier. I stood in the hallway while he continued assigning rooms. Kyle can use your office. It's only temporary. How temporary? Ethan shrugged. Until he gets back on his feet. Kyle had been getting back on his feet since his divorce 6 months earlier. During that time, Ethan had paid several of his bills without discussing it with me. I looked into the office. My drafting table was still wrapped in moving blankets. Samples, client files, and design boards were stacked along the wall. I had planned that room carefully because working from home would reduce my commute and give me more time near the lake. You knew what this room was for, I said. You can work anywhere. No, I can't. He exhaled sharply. This is what I mean, Claire. Everything becomes a fight when it inconveniences you. For 8 years, I had worked weekends, taken extra projects, skipped vacations, and sold the antique jewelry my grandmother left me. Ethan had praised my discipline whenever it benefited him. He had stood beside me through open houses and promised the lake house would belong to our future. Now I could hear all the comments I had once ignored. My parents would love it out here. Kyle needs a fresh start. One day, we'll have enough room for everybody. I had mistaken those remarks for passing thoughts. Ethan had apparently been making plans. Why didn't you ask me before promising them rooms? I said. He stepped closer and lowered his voice. Because you always do the right thing eventually. The words landed harder than his earlier shouting. He did not see my patience as kindness. He saw it as permission. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I walked onto the back deck and answered. My attorney, Melissa Grant, spoke quietly. I've reviewed the documents again. The deed, mortgage, insurance, and occupancy agreements are all exactly as we prepared them. Good. The moving company has received written instructions. The locksmith is available tomorrow morning, and the sheriff's office has been notified that there may be a civil dispute. I looked through the glass doors. Ethan was measuring my office wall, probably deciding where Kyle's television would go. Melissa paused. Claire, activating the full plan may end your marriage. I watched Ethan drag my drafting chair out of the room without asking. He made that decision before I called you. There was a brief silence. Then Melissa asked, Are you ready for us to move forward today? By 9 o'clock the next morning, the quiet road leading to the lake house looked more like a moving convoy than a family visit. Richard's pickup pulled in first, towing a small trailer packed with furniture. Behind him came Elaine's SUV, its roof carrier overflowing with boxes. Kyle arrived last in a rented moving truck, smiling as though he were beginning an exciting new chapter. Ethan walked outside with both arms raised. There they are. His mother hurried over and hugged him before glancing at me. Oh, Claire, Elaine said brightly. You picked such a beautiful place. We'll make this feel like home in no time. Before I could answer, Richard was already studying the front porch. I think we should add rocking chairs here, he said. Maybe extend the deck next spring. He spoke as though the property already belonged to him. Kyle climbed out of the truck, carrying 2 large boxes. Which room is mine? He asked. The office upstairs, Ethan answered immediately. I stepped forward. Stop. The single word made everyone pause. Kyle shifted the boxes in his arms. What? No one brings another item into this house. Elaine laughed awkwardly. Oh, she's still adjusting. Ethan wrapped an arm around his mother's shoulders. Don't worry, he said. Claire gets emotional when plans change. She'll settle down. Richard chuckled. She'll understand once we're all together. The movers hired by Kyle started lowering a sofa from the truck. I walked calmly toward the moving company supervisor. Mr. Collins. He nodded. Yes, ma'am. I need you to follow the updated instructions you received this morning. Without hesitation, he raised his hand. Everyone stop unloading. The crew immediately set the sofa back inside the truck. Confused murmurs spread across the driveway. "What are you doing?" Ethan demanded. The supervisor removed a folder from his clipboard. "We received revised legal authorization before arrival. We cannot unload any personal property onto this premises without written approval from the property's sole owner." Silence settled over the driveway. Elaine frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means," I answered evenly, "no one moves into this house today." Ethan let out a short laugh. "This is ridiculous." He turned toward the supervisor. "I'm her husband." "I understand, sir." "So unload the truck." "I can't." "You absolutely can." The supervisor remained professional. "Sir, I need written authorization from the owner listed in our instructions." Ethan folded his arms. "I am the homeowner." "Then may I see documentation confirming that?" Richard looked confidently at his son. "Show him." Elaine nodded. "Go ahead." Kyle waited with his boxes still in his hands. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket. Nothing. He searched another pocket. Then the glove compartment of his SUV. His expression slowly changed. "Hold on." He opened the driver's door and searched through folders. More silence. Every pair of eyes stayed fixed on him. Finally, Richard asked quietly, "Ethan, where are the ownership papers?" Ethan stopped moving. For the first time since this began, he looked genuinely uncertain. Ethan slammed the SUV door hard enough to make everyone jump. "This is insane," he snapped, pulling his phone from his pocket. "There has to be some mistake." He scrolled through his contacts, found our closing attorney's number, and pressed call. The entire driveway fell silent. I didn't interrupt him. I simply stood on the porch, watching the lake behind the house, while his family waited for someone else to prove him right. "Melissa," Ethan said when the call connected. "It's Ethan Bennett. The moving company is refusing access because they claim Claire is the sole owner." A pause. "No, that's impossible." Another pause. His face began to lose color. "What do you mean the deed is only in her name?" Richard frowned. "What is she saying?" Ethan held up a finger, without looking away from the phone. "The mortgage, too." His shoulders stiffened. "The insurance." Another silence. "The utilities." He swallowed. "The security system." His voice had become noticeably quieter. "So, I can't authorize anyone to move in." He listened for several more seconds before ending the call. No one spoke. Elaine searched his face. "Well," Ethan slowly lowered the phone. "She says everything is legally under Claire." Richard stared at me. "You bought this house without your husband." "I bought it after following legal advice," I answered calmly. Ethan spun toward me. "You planned this." "I protected myself." "You went behind my back." I met his eyes. "Months ago, I discovered you'd secretly guaranteed Kyle's debt." Kyle looked confused. "What debt?" I turned toward him. "The personal loan you couldn't qualify for after your divorce." Kyle blinked. "You knew about that." I found the paperwork in Ethan's desk. Kyle slowly looked at his brother. "You told me Claire agreed." "I was going to tell her." "You already did," I replied quietly, "after signing." Richard's attention shifted sharply to Ethan. "You guaranteed tens of thousands of dollars without discussing it with your wife." Ethan rubbed both hands across his face. "I was helping my brother." "With money that affected our future," I said. "That was different." "No, it showed me that you believed major financial decisions didn't require my consent." Elaine stepped forward. "You're still his wife. Married couples share things." I nodded once. "They also tell each other the truth." She had no answer. I looked around the driveway before asking the question I had rehearsed in my mind for months. Which part of this house did any of you pay for? Richard lowered his eyes. Elaine remained silent. Kyle slowly set his boxes back inside the truck. Nobody answered. At that moment, a marked sheriff's vehicle rolled into the driveway. The deputy stepped out calmly, removed his sunglasses, and approached the group. "Good morning," he said. "We received a request to keep the peace during a property dispute." Ethan immediately pointed toward me. "She won't let my family move into our house." The deputy looked at me. "Ma'am." I handed him a copy of the deed. He reviewed the documents carefully before returning them. He turned back to everyone gathered. "This property is legally owned by Ms. Claire Bennett. Without her permission, no one may establish residence here." Richard let out a long breath. Kyle quietly walked back toward his truck. Ethan stood frozen. For the first time since we had married, he had absolutely no authority over the situation. I reached into my folder and removed a large sealed envelope. Walking toward him, I placed it gently into his hands. He frowned as he looked down at his own name written across the front. "You should read this," I said quietly, "before you say another word." I've written the final section below, bringing every outline thread to its planned resolution. Ethan looked from the envelope to me, then back again. "What is this?" "You'll understand when you open it." His fingers broke the seal. The confidence that had carried him through the last 24 hours disappeared one page at a time. His eyes moved across the first document, then the second. "No," he whispered. Elaine stepped closer. "What is it?" Ethan didn't answer. Richard reached for the papers, and Ethan reluctantly handed them over. Richard adjusted his glasses and read silently before letting out a slow breath. "Divorce papers." No one spoke. Attached behind the petition was a complete set of legal documents. The deed showing I was the sole owner, the mortgage in my name alone, the homeowner's insurance policy, the utility accounts, the occupancy authorization, and the purchase records documenting every dollar that had gone into buying the lake house. Everything led back to one person. Me. Ethan looked at me as though he were seeing a stranger. "You've been planning this." "No," I answered calmly. "I was preparing for the possibility that I would need it." His voice rose. "So you never trusted me?" "I did." I paused. "Until I discovered you had secretly guaranteed Kyle's loan." Kyle's expression tightened. "You really put Claire at that kind of financial risk." Ethan rubbed his forehead. "I knew I could handle it." "You never even told me it happened," I said. "I found the paperwork by accident while organizing our tax records." I remembered that evening clearly. I had walked into Ethan's home office carrying a stack of folders. One unsigned document had slipped from a drawer that hadn't been fully closed. At first, I assumed it was another work file. Instead, it was a personal guarantee, carrying Ethan's signature for a substantial loan Kyle could not obtain on his own. When I confronted Ethan, he dismissed my concerns. "It's family," he had said. When I asked why he had hidden it, he told me I worried too much. That conversation stayed with me. Not because of the money alone. Because he had decided our financial future without believing I deserved to know. I met with attorney Melissa Grant shortly afterward. "I don't want a divorce," I had told her. "Then let's hope you never need these protections," she had replied. Following her advice, I purchased the lake house solely with my own funds. Every document reflected exactly that. I hoped the precautions would never matter. Then Ethan announced that his parents and Kyle were moving into the house I'd spent years earning. Without asking. Without discussing it. Without believing I even had the right to object. That was the moment I knew the marriage I had been trying to protect no longer existed. Elaine looked between us. "You could have talked this out." I tried. I looked directly at Ethan. "I asked why you never consulted me." "You were going to come around." No, I said. You expected me to surrender. Richard slowly folded the documents. He turned toward his son. You told us Claire wanted everyone together. Ethan said nothing. You told us the house belonged to both of you. Still nothing. Richard shook his head. You brought us here under false pretenses. Kyle looked genuinely embarrassed. Claire. I turned toward him. I owe you an apology, he said quietly. Ethan told me this had all been settled. I believed him. If I'd known you weren't even asked, I never would have packed that truck. I believe you. It was the first sincere thing anyone from Ethan's family had said all morning. The deputy, seeing the situation had calmed, gave a polite nod. Looks like everyone understands the ownership now. I'll leave you to work out the rest peacefully. After he drove away, the moving company waited for instructions. Richard placed a hand on Kyle's shoulder. Let's reload anything that came off the truck. Kyle nodded immediately. Neither of them argued. Neither of them protested. Elaine stood silently for a long moment before walking back to her SUV. The cheerful excitement she had arrived with was gone. Ethan remained in the driveway. You're really doing this? I looked at him steadily. You already did. The words seemed to land harder than any accusation. He glanced toward the lake, then back at the house. The future he had imagined, one where he decided who lived there, how the rooms would be used, and how my hard work would benefit everyone else, had vanished. Not because I took something from him, because it had never been his to give away. Within an hour, the trucks pulled out one by one. The driveway became quiet again. The only sounds were the breeze through the trees and the gentle water touching the dock. A locksmith arrived exactly when scheduled. Every exterior lock was replaced. The garage code changed. The security system was updated with new access credentials, known only to me. Over the following weeks, the divorce moved forward without unnecessary conflict. Because the lake house had been purchased solely with my separate funds and documented accordingly, ownership was never in dispute. Ethan rented an apartment across town while sorting through the consequences of the decisions he had made. Richard and Elaine eventually apologized, not for wanting to live with us, but for accepting Ethan's version of events without ever asking me. Kyle sent me a handwritten note, thanking me for treating him with respect, even after everything that happened. I wished him well, but I also understood that forgiveness did not require rebuilding relationships that had been built on assumptions instead of honesty. For the first time in years, I arranged my home exactly the way I wanted. The office became the creative studio I had always imagined. The downstairs bedroom welcomed friends when they visited because they were invited, not because they believed they were entitled to be there. One quiet morning, a few weeks later, I carried a cup of coffee down to the dock just before sunrise. The lake was perfectly still. The water reflected the sky so clearly that it looked as though the horizon had disappeared. I sat there in silence, listening to the birds wake up around me. For years, I had believed preserving peace meant sacrificing pieces of myself. Standing up for my own boundaries had felt selfish. Now I understood the difference. Protecting something you worked for is not selfish. Allowing someone else to erase your voice is. As the sun rose over the water, I smiled, not because I had won an argument, but because I had finally chosen myself. The lake house I fought so hard to buy didn't just become my dream home. It became the place where I finally stopped letting other people decide how my life would be lived.